So hi, it's me, Denny Daniel of the Museum of Interesting Things. Welcome to the world's first Magic Lantern Disney show. So an all Disney Magic Lantern show, which is very rare because we're the first one. So it doesn't exist technically until now. And if you were alive hundreds of years ago, you would have been using these kind of magic lanterns, and you would have had an oil lamp before the invention of the light bulb. So they would have used an oil lamp to make these happen. And then, of course, the later ones, once Edison invents the light bulb, they had illuminated them. But this is one of the original oil lamp ones, and you'll notice there's a wheel on it because once Edison or the Lumiere brothers invent film, the moving image, these magic lanterns also were able to do film reels. And they did have magic lantern film reels. They're very hard to find, very rare, but this one did come with the full box and the film reels. Do you guys see me?
No.
Really? How is that possible?
You're edging to the side of the frame, so if you go a little bit more that way.
This way?
Yeah, you need to raise the lantern up. This way. Yeah, there you go. Up. Maybe pull it closer to you, back to you, towards you. Yep, that's better.
Excellent. So that is the magic lantern that we're talking about. And give me one, and I'm going to turn it around like that so you guys get a full view of what it looks like. And there would have been an oil lamp inside here, which I've got, there it is. There's the oil lamp. And it would come with glass slides. So the glass slides that we're using, let me take one from Rachel and the original boxes. So the first one we're going to show is the Pied Piper. You can all see that, I suppose. And then the glass slides were these kind of strips. So on my other camera 2, you'll see Rachel moving these across as I read the original booklets. So we're going to read from the original booklets, and let me go get one of the booklets. Hold on, I'll get this correctly for you. So that the number 2 is where it belongs. And I'll get another booklet. The second strip I'm going to do is one of my most favorite. It'll be the Pinocchio Strip. And there's the original box for the Pinocchio Strip. How beautiful is that? Avital, they see that? Yes?
Who's Avital?
I'm sorry, Avital.
Yeah,
Daniela.
they
Thank you. And this is the original booklet. So when I'm reading it, this is what I'm reading. And I did not put these into Photoshop and blow them up. I am reading from the 1930s booklets because I am a New Yorker and I am that crazy. Born and raised New Yorkers do these kind of things. So we're going to read from the original booklets. Now, a lot of times when you go to Magic Lantern shows, the guys doing those shows are using a different kind of magic lantern. They also had the square kinds. So these are square magic lantern slides. This one is Sing a Song of Sixpence. And I have the entire story. Eventually, we'll start doing Magic Lantern shows with these. Avital, you have just been deputized to do video and film of the whole place. Document all of us. Enjoy yourself.
I'm staying in the sentence again for my side.
Oh, do you? Oh, good. Have a party. Excellent. We have a whole team of humans working on this today. So those are the square ones that you would use with the big professional machines. We have an original machine from Disney, and I'm going to bring over the box that it came in so that you guys get to see the original box as well. That graphic that you saw on our flyer isn't just some graphic I made up. It is from the original box. How beautiful is that? So that is the original Disney box that the projector came in. And if you look at camera 2, you'll see the projector, which is very small. It was meant for kids. So your parents would have bought one of these. This was your Netflix. This was your Blockbuster Video. This was your Castle Films catalog with 16mm films. This was the beginning of it all. Glass slides, no television, no radio. So I have a few of these boxes. They're absolutely beautiful. And we're going to start the first one now. So, Daniela, you want to get the lights for me?
Yeah, I'll do it.
No, she's got it. You can have fun. Oh, and I'm going to, the next time we turn on the lights, I'll give someone my phone and you can take pictures of something. Although I'll try a picture right here. Oh, this looks good. I think that's sand. I'm so getting into that sand. Okay, so we're on slide one, and of course my light didn't work. I'm using an original, it's called a yad to read these. So for those of you who don't know what a yad is, it is a Bible pointer in the Jewish tradition. And yad means hand. And it's definitely lending me a hand because I couldn't see anything without this. Oh, thanks for moving the chair. Got even white glasses, this is hard. Daniela, when you get a chance, there's a magnifying glass in the bag there. The black one. Somewhere in there. Okay, so the Pied Piper. Long, long ago, there was a town called Hamelin in Brunswick by the river Weser. It was a pleasant place, and the townsfolk were happy and contented until one day there came a plague of rats. Great rats, small rats, lean rats, brawny rats, brown rats, black rats, gray rats, tawny rats. They overrun the city and filled the houses until people were in despair. They fought the dogs, they killed the cats, and bit the babies in the cradles, and ate the cheese out of the vats, and licked the soup from the cook's own ladles. Wow, that's pretty cool. They laughed at the bits of cheese that were put into traps to tempt and catch them. Why? They could have the most delicious food just for the taking. Traps indeed. As soon as they had ruined the larder in one house, they trooped off to the next. Fathers, mothers, uncles, cousins, families by tens and dozens. The good folk of Hamelin did not mean to sit by and watch their food disappearing before their very eyes. They picked up brushes, brooms, sticks and stones, anything they could lay their hands on, and chased the rats in every direction. But cocking their tails in the air, the rats would scurry under the furniture, up the stairs and behind the boxes in the attics, where no one could reach them. At the greengrocer's, the rats were having a fine game, pushing and jostling each other in a long waiting their turn to get the fruit. Then in came the shopkeeper himself. Oh, can someone get that doorbell, please?
I don't do it.
Daniela, you don't have to. So it is the bottom right button that looks like a key, not the big blue one that looks like it ought to be open. I know. And then you're gonna have to wait there and press the elevator when they get in, because the elevator is locked.
I'm sorry?
There was too much for him.
A little bit like
Yes, guys. With an angry cry, he rushed into the street and called to his neighbors. The rats are ruining us. We must get rid of the rats. The mayor and corporation must get rid of them for us. What do we pay them for? That was exactly what everyone wanted to know. Soon, the people of Hamelin were crowded together outside their town hall. They knocked furiously at its doors and shouted to the mayor, "Rats, rats, rats, we've got to get rid of the rats." Out came the mayor, quaking with fear and scratching his head as he tried to think of a way to rid the town of these rats. He held a bag of gold in his hand as a reward for anyone who could think of a way to remove the rats. He saw that no one had any ideas about this, but everyone was holding him responsible for their troubles. He would have given his fine gold chain of his office to have changed places with the humblest citizen of his town. Suddenly, everyone was silent. A stranger's voice was heard. "I'll rid your town of the rats," it called in clear and ringing tones. Every head was turned to see who was speaking. Next slide. Did you get the elevator? Did they come in?
I think so.
All right, everyone, give me one moment. I'm going to just get to the elevator and unlock it so we don't have to go through that twice. So this is a short moment.
Narrative cliffhanger.
Someone went to the
Oh. Oh, they
came
can.
up the stairs, that's why. Hey guys, yeah, not a problem, not a problem. How are you? Very, very good. There are two chairs right over there. You can sit anywhere you want, except in the camera view.
Sorry for that.
No, not a worry, not a worry. Whenever you can, just leave 10 words. Sure.
Oh,
And,
we bought it online.
oh, you did it through the,
Yeah.
oh,
Through
okay, that's even
event,
easier.
Eventbrite.
Excellent, I love you more than life.
Oh, great.
What's that noise? Oh, that's the elevator. Driving me interesting. So we were on slide 3?
Yeah.
There stood the quaintest man they had ever seen. He was very tall and very thin and had sharp blue eyes and a pointed nose. He was dressed half in red and half in yellow. On his head was a high pointed hat and long feathers sticking out of the back. At the end of his red and yellow scarf hung a pipe, which he fingered with as he spoke. The people laughed at this queer figure, but the mayor, seeing a ray of hope and a possible way out of his difficulties, called down, "I'll give this bag of shining gold to anyone who will rid us of these rats." Everybody waited breathlessly to hear the answer. "If I can rid your town of rats, you'll give me the gold?" the stranger called up in reply. Hang on, I'm changing the page. "Yes," promised the mayor. He let the gold coins trickle through his fingers, but gave an angry start as the rat suddenly puffed out of the very bag he was holding. The piper stepped into the street and put his pipes on his lips until his sharp eyes twinkled, for he knew the power of his music. And ere 3 shrill notes the pipe uttered, you heard as if an army muttered, and the muttering grew to a grumbling, and the grumbling grew to a mighty rumbling. And out of the houses, the rats came tumbling. They poured in a stream out of the houses and shops at the call of the piper's music. They scurried off shelves and out of cupboards, down from the attics and up from the cellars. Rats who had made their nests in the men's Sunday hats stirred at the magic sound. Then, at once, wide awake and bustling their babies along, were in the streets in a twinkling. Next slide. "Open wide the gates," ordered the mayor. And willing hands poured the huge iron-barred gates as far apart as they could go. The rats should leave Hemlin at the first possible minute. The piper stepped out of the shadow of the archway into the sunlight, his pied coat shining red and yellow, and the rats swarmed after him. Then the townsfolk rushed forward and began to push the gates back. They were almost shut when there was a shrill squeak from the last rat of all. He had lagged behind to finish a tasty morsel. Quickly, the gates swung open again, and in an impudent wave of his tail, the rats scampered through. Out in the country, the piper danced along the dusty road. His eyes gleamed, and he played a merry jigging measure. Ever and again, he would turn to the rats, and bending his pipe to the ground, shrill sweet notes that told of a paradise for rats. The rats pushed and jostled each other in their eagerness to follow, and the last one kicked himself for his foolishness in staying behind and making himself late for such a feast as this. The rats had forgotten Hamlin Town, and, quite unwearied by their journey, they were streaming after the piper. As they came to each hill, it seemed that just beyond must be their paradise. Their eyes glistened, their mouths watered, and the piper played and smiled. Next slide. Suddenly, he stepped aside, and the rats stood still. There in the valley before them was the largest cheese they had ever seen, and its appetizing smell reached them. Their whiskers twitched and their noses trembled. Cheese! 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 With one accord, they poured down the hill onto the thousands of holes that appeared before them in the cheese. With a sly smile, the piper followed, still blowing his pipe. Up came the last rat, puffing and panting in fear of being left behind. The piper gave a last shrill toot, and the rat popped in. Then the cheese closed. "Well," said the piper, "that's that. Now for my bag of gold." Letting his pipe dangle at the rest from the end of his pipe scarf, he retraced his steps. Next slide. Oh, that's, yeah, I'll be talking about. Nearing the town, he could see the people crowded at the walls above the gateway. When they saw the piper returning alone, they flung their hats joyfully in the air and cheered him loudly. The mayor saw him coming too, and his smile began to fade. "Give this ragged fellow a bag of gold," he thought. "Why, all he's done is to blow his pipe and take a walk into the country. Oh no." He looked sourly at the merry townsfolk and wondered how he could win them to share his opinion. Then he remembered that the people of Hamlin were as greedy as himself. Why, they would laugh at such a bargain. The piper stood outside the gate smiling happily. "I've done my work, as I was told," he called. "Now I'll take my bag of gold." But the mayor sneered down at him. "A bag of gold? Ha, ha," he laughed. "You crazy loon. Why, all you did was pipe a tune." The piper looked up. He could scarcely believe his ears when he heard the townsfolk join in mockingly. "All you did was pipe a tune." His face darkened angrily. He thought how dishonest and ungrateful they were, and how it was a shame that all the pretty young children he had seen earlier in the town should grow up to be like that. But the piper held to his bargain, and he shook his fist and said, "Folks who put me in a passion may find me pipe to another fashion." At that, the mayor and the corporation and the town and the people of the Hamlin shouted with laughter. The mayor moved forward with red face and scornful voice. "You threaten us, fellow? Do your worst. Blow your pipe there till you burst." He stepped back and smiled as the people echoed his words. Then the piper made us his mind. He would save the children from growing up to be ungrateful promise breakers. He stepped forward, across the bridge, over the moat to the gates of the Hamlin, barred against him. Raising his pipe to his lips, he blew 3 notes of such sweetness that they stirred the ugly laughter of the townspeople. The sweet notes filled the air. The piper played on, but the tune seemed to alter. It became grayer, and he beat time to it, and time to it with one pointed shoe. The feather in his cap jiggered up and down as if giving an invitation that seemed to say, "Boys and girls, come out and play." It was a joyous call to all the children of the town. Next slide. The children of the hamlet were kept hard at work by their harsh parents. The little girls were sweeping with brooms whose handles were much too large for them, or scrubbing stone steps or floors. Outside, their brothers were hard at work. Suddenly, one of them looked up from his sawing. "Listen," he cried. "What's that?" And the others listened too. Then, as they heard the piper's sweet and merry tune, they flung down their work and ran into the street, where could this music be coming from? With the enchanting sound in their ears, they hurried toward the city gates. These were still locked and barred, but they could hear the music louder and more clear just beyond them. The piper just heard them coming, and he took a deeper breath. Puffing out his cheeks, he blew a note so loud and sweet that it filled the children with an excitement that they had never felt before. They crowded up until the children in the hamlet were behind that gate. Closer and closer they pushed, until at last the bars began to give. With a great noise of breaking wood and bursting bolts, the gates fell apart. Next slide. The children streamed through. Outside, they pulled up suddenly. They blinked in the bright sunshine and gazed at the little stream below the bridge, which they saw so rarely, and the meadows beyond where they had never played. Then they saw the piper. He stood there smiling. The glad notes fell from his pipe. It was a tune that made exciting little shivers run up and down their backs. Their feet, which had plodded to and fro all morning at their tasks, now began to tap lightly on the ground. Seeing this, the piper took one step away from the gates and, turning his back on the town, marched once again down the road. A moment later, the children tripped after him. They did not even look back at the town. Next slide. So high overhead that he could not see what was happening flew a stork. In his long beak, he held a carefully tied up bundle. He was bringing 2 babies to be left at the hamlet town. And his sharp eyes looked to the left and right for the house where he was to leave them. Swooping down, he landed gently beside a chimney pot. He was just about to untie the knot of the bundle with his sharp beak when it seemed to him that the city of Hamlin was exceptionally quiet. Then, as he looked around far away over the rooftops, the steeple, and the clock tower, he saw the children dancing away in the distance. There came to him the faint echo of the piper's music. The babies in his bundle heard it too, and wriggled their toes in glee of the merry sound. His wings flapped strongly. The stork flew on, but the children were now following the piper so quickly that he found it hard work to catch up with them. In the meantime, the piper had traveled far, and the stork, his long neck outstretched, had caught up with the merry party. The first child he passed was a tiny cripple who hobbled painfully along on his crutches behind the others. Then he flew over the older ones, who were carrying a small brother or sister pick-a-back. In front of them was the piper. His cheeks puffed out as he piped his joyous song. It told of happiness coming nearer and nearer. Attracted by the happy sounds, the two babies poked their heads out of the bundle and crowed gleefully at all they saw. Then, as they turned a bend in the road, they saw before them the Kuppelberg Hill. It stuck out against the sky like an enormous sugar loaf. The children hurried toward it. The piper's tune grew merrier and more shrill, and the children fancied they could hear a voice which sang, joyful land, happy girl and happy boy land, laughing and playing from year to year, trouble and care never enter here." The piper stooped and blew 3 sharp, clear notes. Suddenly, the hillside cracked apart with a tremendous noise. The great boulders tumbled like enormous sugar loaf. The children hurried towards it. Okay, I did that.
Sorry, hang on, trying to like get back in frame.
Suddenly, the hillside cracked apart with tremendous noise. The great boulders tumbled into a heap on each side. A huge cavern appeared in the rock. Then, from beyond there shone a lovely light, and from every side came the sweet music of the pipe. "Go, children," said the piper, "go in. This is your own joyland. Here you will be happy forever." With cries of glee, they rushed forward towards the open space where fountains played and fruit trees grew. Next slide. Tired but triumphant, the cripple boy came last. When the piper saw him, he called out merrily, "Well done! That was a brave journey, my little fellow. But," and he pointed to the crutches, "you don't want those here." He blew 1 clear note on his pipe. The crutches fell from the boy's hands, and he straightened up. He could not believe the good fortune that had come to him, and his eyes grew round with surprise. Then he gave a happy shout, and for the first time in his life, he ran to join the others. Next slide. Inside, the boys and girls of Hamelin were happier than words can tell. In the garden were seesaws, swings, and roundabouts. Toys of every kind lay on the grass. Instead of flowers, there grew stripped sugar sticks, and candy hung from every branch. There were trees to climb and pools to paddle in. There the sun shone always, and no one ever grew old. And in the outside world, the people say that if you lie on the grass outside Kuppelberg Hill in the summer evenings and put your ear to the ground, you can hear the song of the lost children of the hamlet. Joyland, joyland, happy girl and boyland, laughing and playing from year to year, trouble and care never enter. And that is our story. I hope you guys enjoyed. So that is the Pied Piper. And that is the original story, which, funny enough, is much different from the stories we grew up in. And you'll find that a lot of the stories from the 1800s and the early 1900s were very, very different. They were often even more brutal, sometimes more, just harsh compared to the stories of today. The Disney of today is totally, totally different. So now we're going to do Pinocchio. And in fact, when I was studying at NYU, I remember reading the original Shakespeare's. And Shakespeare didn't write most of his stories, most of the famous ones in particular. A lot of them were written by other authors, and they were traditional stories. And if you read the original Spanish stories and the other stories, you find that the stories were much more brutal. And with Shakespeare, everyone dies. But believe it or not, they're actually more brutal than the original stories are even more brutal than the Shakespeare stories. Where is it? That one? For Pied Piper. I'm sorry, for Pinocchio.
Pinocchio, is that right there? Do you want to ask if everyone can see properly? 'Cause I'm a little concerned with the setup here to the table.
That's- is
Yeah,
everyone's- You can see on that screen what's going on.
Yeah, and it's a little hard to tell about what the sidebar.
I've got to find the text, which I had shown in my demonstration and then moved away.
Yeah.
Where did my text go?
Where was it?
We don't have it. I walked away with it. Where's the, we should put the box. What was that?
The side.
Oh, this side.
I'm wondering whether I should put this on top of the garbage.
Where's the Pied Piper box?
Guys, that's inside of the wrong thing.
Okay, it's a little bit.
Hold on. We have to find the story. Okay, when I went over to open the door.
I didn't touch it, whatever it was.
So sorry for this technical difficulty. We're looking for the text. Need a projector while we wait? Oh. No, that's not it.
Denny, do you want to put on a film?
Yeah, why don't we play the film? Okay, so while we look for that, I'm going to play the film that Sharon had asked for. So this is a film that will give you the history of the Magic Lantern. This is an amazing film. I'm not sure the exact age, it's probably mid-1900s, early 1900s. And it'll give you the whole history behind the Magic Lantern.
Welcome to the Magic Lantern movie.
Wait, hold on. Of course, this has to have some technical difficulties as well. Okay, hang on 1 second. Thank God I've done this before.
Would you like a little bit of light?
No, I'm okay. Fortunately, I don't have to spin this up.
Welcome to the Magic Lantern movie by Matthew Holland. Every age has its own magic. Part science, part art, part mystery. Centuries before television or the movies were invented, audiences were enchanted by pictures projected from a simple machine called the Magic Lantern. Magic Lantern shows were presented at home and in theaters throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, often accompanied by mechanical music boxes. Traveling showmen in the early days walked from town to town carrying projectors on their backs. Alchemists in the Middle Ages and seers in ancient Greece and Egypt may have produced spectacular effects using the optical principles of the Magic Lantern. At the phantasmagorious live shows soon after the French Revolution, audiences were terrified to see ghosts and skeletons appear from nowhere, ancestors of today's horror movies. This tiny magic lantern was hammered out of tin over 200 years ago in Pennsylvania. More elaborate machines were later made, but each used the same method, which provided the basis for all future projection of slides and motion pictures. Three elements were needed. First, a light source, sometimes only a candle. Second, condensing lenses to concentrate the light. Third, objective lenses in front of the glass slides to project and focus the image on the screen. Limelight projectors used tanks of oxygen and hydrogen under great pressure, which led to a jet inside where the mixture was ignited. Line reflectors increased the brightness. Often two or more lanterns were mounted side by side, directed to the same spot on the screen where their images were blended into a dissolve effect that miraculously changed day into night, or a calm sea into a stormy one. Magic lanterns became the rage and were a profitable business. A catalog published in 1893 showed city streets and buildings turned into a wonderland of outdoor advertisements. For popular entertainment, Magic Lantern programs borrowed from many sources. Fairy tales, travel views, scenes from the Bible, shortened plays and stories were often presented with recitations. Sequences of images, sometimes on one slide, depicted highlights in familiar stories like Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf. The same subjects were repeated in many formats, as on these revolving discs. Movement was added with a simple lever that could tilt one image back and forth over another. The diorama slide reproduced a long, continuing scene, like the pan shot used in movies today. Hand-turned circular slides showed stars and planets moving across the sky with scientific precision. Chronotrope slides, also known as artificial fireworks, rotated slowly or quickly to create hypnotic moving patterns. Double or triple layers of painted glass with areas blacked out could be pushed or pulled to perform comical tricks. Some of the jokes and characters were as old as theatrical history. The illusion of true motion became more and more convincing. By the end of the 19th century, a device had been invented to project images from rolls of a new pliable material called celluloid. Early motion pictures were often seen on programs with lantern slides, sometimes projected from the same machine. The great French movie pioneer Georges Méliès, who had used projected slides in his work as a magician, made a movie in 1903, which he called The Magic Lantern. In it, familiar figures appeared on the screen, but now the show had something new. The magic of the 20th century. With the immense success of moving pictures, magic lanterns were put aside in attics and junkies. Today, they're being rediscovered by collectors and museums. Historically, their projection of changing images represents one important step in the prehistory of the motion picture. We see them also as a unique folk art, whose detailed miniature paintings by unknown artists still reveal to us a timeless magic world. Good night.
Thank you. Sharon, I know you know the exact year, so you can unmute yourself and tell us, because I know you researched this for
I
me.
think it's 1975.
Wow.
Yeah, Sharon did a whole bunch of research for us.
Yeah.
So easier to get it from the horse's mouth. Paul, were you able, unmute yourself, were you able to use the link that I emailed everyone? Because if you weren't, then everyone, all those people that got that email didn't get in.
I'm on.
You're on, which means that that link did work, but I noticed it didn't at first, but now it works.
It works now, yes.
Okay, good. It was probably because I wasn't in the room yet. That's probably why. So guys, she showed you those wood, they call them slip slide lantern slides. So this is an original one from the 1800s. These you would, there's this little thing here and you would move it up and down and it would make it seem like the donkey did something. So you're probably seeing it better now. I don't know what you guys see. So that is an original wood one from the 1800s. This one was special. The guy had no, if you move that, I'll move me. Don't move the camera. Camera stays where it is. The human moves. Because I can move. I can do those things. So this is the original glass magic lantern slide. And you would move this back and forth so you see the thing kick. Now, what's interesting about this one is the guy had no clue what it was. What?
You need light behind it.
A phone with your light.
Here.
He'll do it. He had it before.
Yeah.
It's now projecting onto the back of my iPad, so it looks kind of cool. So this one is very interesting because he didn't realize what he had. This is a woman on a horse, and she's wearing three colors, white, violet, and green. This is a suffragette magic lantern slide. Yeah, which is very rare. In fact, almost impossible to find. I've never seen another one. The guy had no clue it was a suffragette one. I do a show on the suffragettes, so I realized right away, you know, a woman riding a horse, wearing those colors, and she has the hat and everything. It's clearly a suffragette one. When we open up and the world opens up again, and you guys come to our speakeasies, we're going to do a Magic Lantern live one, and you guys will be able to see all these slides. I'll have them out for you, and it's a lot of fun. But virtually, you get to see it kind of close up, so it's kind of fun, and you get to see the making of. So the next one we're going to do is Pinocchio, right? Okay, excellent. So you want to hold on to this very well. Hold on. And hold the glass so it doesn't fall out. And then I'm going to give you your phone back because it's not my phone. All right. Let's hit the light. Avital, can you hit the light for me? And then I'll give it back to you. Thanks, Avital. And I normally have a huge magnifying glass, and today, of course, I packed it and it disappeared.
I didn't. Oh.
So I'm using a very, very cute, tiny one in order to read these, making it even more challenging, which I love a challenge, and I got one. And my water. Why does it seem like it's, oh, because your lights are on. Guys, take off your lights. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so Pinocchio. One night, long ago, the evening star shone down on a sleepy village. The ragged figure of Jiminy Cricket appears, searching for somewhere to sleep. He peeks through a lighted window. Next slide. And sees Geppetto, the woodcarver, and his pets, Figaro, the kitten, and Cleo, the goldfish. Cleo, the goldfish. Geppetto is just finishing a wood puppet. I shall call him Pinocchio, he said. Jiminy creeps in. Next slide. All the carved clocks struck. Ding dong. Bedtime, says Geppetto. Cleo, go into your house. Figaro and I will go upstairs. Jiminy feels sleepy too. Next slide. Figaro, I've forgotten to open the window, says Geppetto. Look, the wishing star. I wish my little puppet Pinocchio was a real boy. Next slide. Jiminy, awakened by the ticking clocks, suddenly finds the room filled with light. A lovely blue fairy enters and touches Pinocchio with her starlit wand, saying, next slide, little puppet made of pine, wake, the gift of life is thine. He, Pinocchio, stirs, blinks his eyes, and says, I can move, I can talk. The fairy says, be brave, truthful, unselfish, son, to Geppetto. And one day, you'll be a real boy. Next slide. Learn the difference between right and wrong. How shall I know, says Pinocchio. Asks Pinocchio. Jiminy jumps in to explain. Will you be his conscience? Asked the fairy. Next slide. Yes, says Jiminy. The fairy touches him with her wand, and in a flash of light, all his old clothes change to new. Remember, let your conscience be your guide, says the fairy, vanishing. Next slide. Jiminy teaches Pinocchio to whistle. They are dancing and singing when suddenly Pinocchio slips off the branch. Crash! Geppetto wakes, shaking with fright, and grabs his gun. Creeps downstairs, hunting everywhere. He suddenly finds, to his delight, the little puppet is alive. He can walk and talk. Next slide. Geppetto introduces him to Cleo and Figaro. They dance to the sound of the music box and then go off to bed. All is quiet. Next morning, the sun is shining. You must go to the school and study hard, says Geppetto as he kisses Pinocchio goodbye. Lazy Jiminy is slow, but hurries after. Off they go, but alas, too schemer. Next slide. Actually, slide 13. So 12 was next morning.
So
I was
it's a lot
enjoying
more-
reading.
it's a lot more slides than I've ever.
I know.
Makes it interesting.
So now we're on which slide?
13.
Excellent. Off they go, but alas, two schemers meet Pinocchio. J. Worthington, Foul Fellow the Fox, and Gideon, the Stupid Cat. Look, says the fox, a walking puppet with no strings. Next slide. He's worth a fortune to someone, but wait. They see Stromboli's poster. They decide to waylay Pinocchio. Next slide. The three pals go off singing to find Stromboli, grasping puppet master. Jiminy follows sadly, hoping to give warning of the evil plot. Next slide, which would be 16. Stromboli sees money in the stringless puppet. Pinocchio becomes a star and has his first taste of fame. Next slide. He sings and dances. The people cheer, encore, and pay more gold. Even Stromboli is pleased. Pinocchio tries to run home and tell his father. Too late. He finds himself caught. His friends have sold him for life. He sits weeping. Jiminy comes to the rescue, but he can't undo the lock. Next slide. The fairy takes pity on him, but Pinocchio is ashamed and lies to excuse himself. At each lie, his nose grows till birds nest on the end. Next slide. But the fairy is kind. When he promises to be good, he sets him free, and they run joyfully home. Meanwhile, the worried Geppetto has gone out to search for him. Next slide. Foul fellow plots with a wicked coachman to catch a lot of little boys in return for a huge bag of gold. Pinocchio, on his ways, meets the fox. Next slide, 22. I know just the place for the boys. No school, lots of ice cream and candy, says the fox. You need a rest. He looks at Pinocchio's tongue. Yes, you must go to Pleasure Island. Next slide. Pinocchio jumps up next to the coachman, full of excitement. Lots of other little boys clamber up too. On their way to Pleasure Island, Pinocchio and Lampwick make friends. Next slide. Lampwick teaches him to smoke, and they stuff themselves with ices and sweets. Jiminy is bored and decides to leave Pinocchio to his new friends. He suddenly discovers something is wrong. Next slide. Lampwick brays like a donkey, and an awful change takes place. Pinocchio's hat pops off. Long ears and tails have grown. Run, run, says Jiminy, before it's too late. Next slide, 26. Geppetto goes out to search for Pinocchio, but is swallowed by Monstro, the terror of the sea. Pinocchio and Jiminy arrive home to an empty house. Next slide. They sit crying. The fairy sends a dove with a message which reads, Geppetto is alive inside the whale. Hurrah, shouts Pinocchio. We'll rescue him. Next slide. You might be killed, warns Jiminy. I must save him. I must go to the bottom of the ocean, replies Pinocchio. Tying a rock to his tail, they sink into the watery depths, seeing strange and wonderful sights. Next slide. Inside the whale, Geppetto and his pets are starving. There are no fish left inside the water. They may die unless Monstro wakes up hungry. Next slide. At last, Pinocchio finds Monstro, and they manage to get swallowed with a lot of fish. Geppetto is busy catching all he can. he suddenly finds Pinocchio. Hurrah, hurrah! Next slide. But how can we escape, says Pinocchio. I'll light a fire and make Monstro sneeze. Well, not during COVID, that would be terrible. Suddenly, like an earthquake, the whale draws a breath. Ka-choo! He sneezes and, next slide, out sails the raft between the mighty jaws. Onto the open ocean, the furious whale plunges afterward. Next slide. Father, we are free, shouts Pinocchio. Crash, with a lash of his tail, the whale breaks the raft into 1,000 pieces. Next slide. Save yourselves, says Geppetto. But Pinocchio grabs his father, and a big wave throws them onto a sheltered beach. Geppetto slowly wakes. Next slide. He finds Pinocchio face down in the pool and sadly takes him home, noticing his pets are safe. The blue fairy appears again, smiling. Next slide. You have proved yourself brave. She touches Pinocchio with her wand. He stirs and says, Father, look at me. Geppetto finds his wish has come true. Pinocchio is a real boy at last. And that is our story. Who's up on the internet? So when you look at the
So you don't have an iPhone tracker?
traffic troubles. Oh, this is a great one. So the next one I'm going to play is Mickey Mouse Traffic Troubles. Perfect for New Yorkers. And this is a new one. So those of you who saw this a year ago when we debuted it live will not recognize this one. I've never done this one before. Ooh, and just give me a moment. It's very old and the paper is crumpled and covered in some of the text. Mickey Mouse in Traffic Troubles. Honking and screeching and clashing of gears, drivers in tantrums and ladies in tears. Newsboys are shouting their news in your ears, give you the shivers and add to your fears. In through the maze of trucks piled with wares, through flippers and cycles and buses with stairs. Speeds a quaint taxi and without any cares. Mickey is driving and looking for fares. Next slide. Taxi, taxi. Standing on the sidewalk, waving his cane and trying to catch Mickey's eye, stood a big fat pig, all dressed up with somewhere to go. Stopping his car with a screech, Mickey leaped out and with a big smile threw open the door of his cab. And then the horns went honk, and the brakes went screech, and the fat pig squeezed to reach his seat. Big Pete, the cop, rushed from his beat and ordered Mickey off the street, leaving the traffic all in a tangle. Mickey sped merrily down the street with his portly passenger. Next slide. When he came to wide holes in the street, his taxi stretched out its wheels and skimmed around them. And when the holes were small and close together, the old car squeezed itself up tight, pulled in its wheels, and ran between them. Mickey smiled as he looked at his taxi meter. Oh boy, look at that, $7.35. And then he struck a bump and the 7 dropped leaving only 35 cents. Next slide. Number 4. Then Biff, on his roof, lit a little wee car and jumped on his hood with a terrible jar, and scooting right off, left Mickey afar with his eyes full of smoke and his ears full of tar. But Mickey was in no mood today to let anybody pass him, least of all little tiny can like that. So he stepped on his throttle and stuck out his chin, but the little wee car, he just couldn't trim. So he pulled up a lever, and his taxi of tin raised up in the air and skimmed over him. This seemed to peeve the little car, so he ran around Mickey again, and plunging through a mud hole, he showered the taxi with mud. Mickey tried to catch him again, but the taxi stopped at the mud hole, and lifting up its fenders like skirts, carefully waded across. But by that time, the little car was gone. Clunk! Mickey's taxi hit a big rock, and off went the whole back end of it, fat pig and all. But Mr. Pig got up, and running after the rest of the taxi, he jumped back in. He had no more than just got settled when, bang, the taxi hit another rock. Then up went the big fat pig and sailed through the air, and splash in a mud hole he lit and stayed there, while Mickey sped on through the alley and square, at last to pull up and to find he's no fare. Taxi, 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 now who'll come but little Minnie Mouse? She had her accordion and muddle roll and wanted Mickey to take her to her music lesson. Slide 5. Mickey drove his taxi. Mickey drove his taxi on right through the country green. Minnie sung a song to him and played her accordion. But suddenly there came a bang. And, dear me, what a scene. The poor old taxi licked his foot and tried hard not to scream. Never mind, old boy, I'll fix it, crooned Mickey, and taking out his pump, he started to work. But the rusty old pump fell to pieces in his hands. Then he spied a young pig trotting by, seizing the porter. He put the hose in his mouth and jumping up and down on him, soon had the tire looking like a big fat donut. Next one. But whiz, the air rushed back out of the tire and filled the pig. Up like a balloon he went, Mickey falling off with a plop. Here you are, my friend. Just what you have been looking for. Mr. Pep's snake oils cure everything. He looked to see a funny old medicine man with big bottle leaning over him. But I don't have any, shouted Mickey, trying to shoo him away. Just to show Mickey what his medicine would do, the doctor poured some in the radiator of the taxi, and zoop, boop, 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 the old taxi went up with a jump and shot through the air and came down with a clunk. It tore through the fence, through a tree, on a stump, and acted as though it were terribly drunk. Picking himself up out of the dust, Mickey tore after the taxi and at last caught up with it. Seizing the top, which was dragging behind, he climbed up and got hold of the wheel. Next slide. The old taxi sped through the country, and how? And jumping a wall, hit a big rock. Kazow! But the worst was to come. You will surely allow, for it came down kerplunk on a sleepy old cow. Next slide. Down the road went the cow with a deafening moo, and hitting a barn, she went right on through, and into the yard, draped with chickens, she flew, while on her back rode the old taxi too. She hit a big wall with a hullabaloo, and feathers and brickbats around her she strew. Then up from the feathers came a shrill doo-doo. 'Twas gay little Mickey and Minnie Mouse too. Mickey had a taxi, Mickey had a fare, Mickey lost his passenger, but he didn't care. For Minnie came along, and then the taxi ran amok. Now Mickey had no taxi, but there's Minnie. Gee, what luck. And that's our story. Traffic troubles. Happens to me on the streets of New York in a cab every day. So the next one, once again, for us New Yorkers, is Policeman Donald. Yeah, I tried to pick all the New Yorkie ones. Mama don't raise no dummy, you know. This one's gonna go quick too. Warning my slide changer person. Okay. Donald Duck in Policeman Donald. Slide one. Now Donald is an officer, as proud as Punch is he. Next slide. With boastful air, he brags, I'm boss. I'll make the cars mind me. Next slide. Here comes a car at breakneck speed. Don turns the sign to stop. Slide 4. But Pluto rushes through and laughs. Slide 5. At dawn, the traffic cop. Slide 6. You can't do this to me, shouts Don, and grabs his scooter car. 7. I'll write your names down in my book. Oop. I'll write your names down in my book. Hey, stop. You've gone too far. He'll catch them yet. He's getting close. 9. He's going to have hard luck. The kids drive on beneath a sign. 10. But Don forgot to duck. 11. Don hits the road sign with a crash. It's he who has to stop. 12. He'll never, never try again to be a traffic cop. That's our story. You know, these are like in a New York Minute, the New Yorkie ones, right? Yeah. It's funny how that happens. So next one is Pluto on Ice. Pluto is watching Mickey skate and cutting figure eights. He thinks that he'd be just as good, but then he'd need 4 skates. Slide 2. So Mickey says, just you wait here. I'll get you Minnie's pair. So off he goes, and glad Pluto to wait can hardly bear. Now Pluto, take both pairs of skates and see what you can do. You ought to do it twice as well with 4 skates. I had 2. Slide 4. He starts off Pluto with a push. One stroke is straight and long, but Pluto loses balance, and then and both right feet go wrong. Right? He twists and turns, reverses, whirls. His ankles are so weak while Mickey watches from the bank, much too surprised to speak. But now he seems to get his feet to stay together more. He's doing well, or so he thinks, and waves with one paw. Backwards, he speeds across the ice. He thinks, oh, this is fine, but Mickey sees what Pluto can't. And that's the danger side. So Mickey shouts and waves his hand, but Pluto's far away. The hole is just behind him now. He'll fall as sure as day. 9. But no, his legs spread out in time. He pauses safely over, and even now, he doesn't know what all the shouting's for. 10. Crash! It's the notice board he's hit. It nearly breaks the pole. Bending back, it shouts him off, safely across the hole. 11. And now he's back, he tries to stop and find his feet besides, but stop he can't. And so goes on, and swoops and turns and glides. And 12. Says Mickey then, gosh, Pluto skates the best I've ever seen. His figure 8 is twice as good because he makes 16. And that's Pluto on ice. Woo-hoo.
Do you want to?
What's that?
Make it wrong.
So we're having a switch of humans, and I'm getting up to my next page. This one is called the Gorilla Mystery. It's a really fun one. Another new one that I just got. And like I said, I'm trying to read from very, very old text. Oh boy, this is an awful mess. Ms. Minnie Mouse is in distress. A great gorilla's loose, we hear. But Mickey Mouse is always near. Outside, the shades of night were falling as Mickey Mouse settled back comfortably and buried his little black nose in his evening newspaper. Suddenly, he dropped his paper. A gorilla, he whispered, his eyes wide with terror. There, sure enough, in huge type, on the front page were the words, "Gorilla escaped from zoo. Man killer on the large." Mickey rushed to the telephone, whirled the handle, and anxiously waited for Minnie to answer. Slide 2. Hello, came Minnie's sweet little voice. Is that you, Mickey? How are you? But Mickey was so excited that he jabbered. Minnie, Minnie, there's a great gorilla around loose. Hurry and unlock the doors and the windows. What did you say? Minnie piped in surprise, and Mickey told her over and over again until at last she understood and smiling said, "Ah, Mickey, you know I'm not afraid." Then, turning to the piano, she sang and played this song to him. All alone by the telephone, waiting for a ring, a ting-a-ling. As Mickey listened, his fear left. A smile stole over his face, and he stared to dance around the floor. Now, at that very moment, a face was peering in Minnie's window. The gorilla! He had hidden in Minnie's yard, and hearing the music, had come over to see what it was all about. Spying Minnie at the piano, the great hairy ape sprang through the window and quietly crept towards the defenseless little singer. Hovering over her for a minute, he threw his great arms around Minnie and dragged her away from the piano, and he clapped his hands over her mouth. Eek! She uttered a piercing scream. Mickey, who was dancing with the receiver in his ear, heard Minnie scream. Instantly, he thought of the gorilla. Minnie! Minnie! He shouted into the telephone, but all he heard was a scornful blah from the monster croaking into the telephone. Mickey was so stunned that he was unable to move, but he pulled himself together and rushed right out of his house. He sprang over the stones and fences. Our plucky Mickey Mouse. Or he hit the snags. Slide 4.
I know.
He hit the snags and mud holes head on with crash and flop. But save he must Minnie, and nothing made him stop. Coming to Minnie's doorstep, he suddenly realized that he was no match for the gorilla, and that he must outwit the brute. So he stopped, peered into the door, and listened. Hearing nothing, he tiptoed in. Pat, pat, pat. Something was walking behind the hinge. Arr! Mickey was terribly frightened, but quickly turning around, he discovered that it was only a duck. Phew. Mickey certainly felt relieved. But whang! Up went the window shade behind him. Out of the house and into the barn he dashed, slamming the door. But what was that? 6 pairs of eyes were gleaming at him out of the darkness. With a squeak of terror, Mickey flooded the barn with light, and there were before him sat 5 hens and an old rooster. I have duct tape for the door. Is it not working? You see it? There you go. Now you're good. Now you're welcome. Continued over. Eek! Mickey heard another scream, hurrying out of the yard and up the stairs in Minnie's house. Mickey had no thought of caution. Gorilla or no gorilla, Minnie must be saved. As Mickey rushed up to the 2nd floor, the brute was dragging Minnie across the hall and into the room, slamming the door. Slide 5. Minnie, Minnie, where are you? Mickey called anxiously, running down the hall. But as he went into the room, the gorilla came out through another door behind Mickey, and crossing the hall, he disappeared, banging the door after him. Mickey then ran from door to door, peeping through every keyhole, and suddenly his heart froze. For there, through a keyhole, he saw Minnie in a room, a handkerchief tied over her mouth, bound securely in a chair. Mickey banged at the door with both fists, and grrr, out came the huge form of the ape, angrily gnashing his sharp fangs. Back to the wall sprang Mickey, quick, and cocked his pistol with a click. Stand back. And with your hands, where he was stuttering commands, the ape snarled fiendishly at him, all ready to tear him limb from limb. So Mickey, pulling on the trigger, shot at the great big jungle jigger. But no real bullets spouted out. Instead, a cuckoo tweaked his snout. And then he sprang right through the air, but Mickey ducked and wasn't there. So crash, the big brute banged to the wall and fell down like a cannonball. Mickey, crawling from under the monster, rushed into Minnie's room and speedily freed her from her bonds, just in time to hear the gorilla getting up. Next slide. There wasn't a moment to lose, whispering to Minnie to hold one end of the rope. Mickey grasped the other end and stretched it tightly across the doorway. The startling brute came rushing in at that moment, and boom, down he crashed, hitting his head so hard that he saw a million stars. Next slide. And as the gorilla slowly got up, his mind in a whirl, his eyes blinking stupidly, it was to find himself bound from head to foot with the strong rope. while Mickey and Minnie, joyous and happy once more, were skipping and dancing all around him. No matter if the hero's small, great pluck and courage conquers all. Ta-da. And that is the gorilla story. This one is. Ah. Yes. So, being that it's summertime, I figured I'd do this one, and it's kind of special for Rachel. This one is The Night Before Christmas. We do requests here.
Christmas in July.
Christmas in July, the best time for Christmas. Oh. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimneys with care, in hopes of St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children will nestle all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. Christmas Eve, outside the house, everything was still, and the snow, which had been falling all day all the day through, was almost a foot deep in the garden. Slide 2. Indoors, however, the room was warm and comfortable. In the open brick fireplace, a cheerful log fire was still burning, hanging from the mantel shelf, where the 8 stockings that belonged to the children, fast asleep in the room upstairs. They had drawn the curtains back from the window, and the light of the moon stretched in. Next slide. Something had just whisked past his face. Santa Claus's reindeer and Santa himself. Santa was cracking his whip and calling to the reindeer, "Gee up! We must call at the Browns." He carefully steered the sleigh downwards so that it came to rest smoothly and quietly on the roof. Slide 4. Santa stepped out of the sleigh and lifted the sack of presents onto his shoulder. He looked at the chimney pot and scratched his head and said, "Bless my soul, I hope I get down safely." Then he thrust first one leg down and then the other. With much wiggling, he finally disappeared into the chimney, making peculiar grunting and groaning sounds. Then Santa appeared in the room. Scarlet cape and coat, bushy mustache and beard were all as black as soot. Next slide. Shaking the soot onto the hearth, he quietly laid down his sack and, opening it, drew forth a large Christmas tree. Then, picking up a toy trumpet, he blew a long, soft note into the mouth of the sack. He listened, but nothing could be heard. Santa smiled and said, "They're having a good sleep." Next slide. He blew his trumpet again, and at once the Toy Town band appeared. In their red and white uniforms, they marched smartly past. "Not so much noise there," Santa whispered. "You'll wake the children." Then the sack began to sway, and sounds of yawning and sleeping sighs were heard. It was the remainder of the toys waking up. They began to push and pull and struggle until the cock-your-lee bird found the hole in the sack and slipped out. The other toys, they followed him. "Hey, get a move on," cried the gollywog rather rudely. Behind them came a little doll dressed like a lorry driver, steering his tractor with great care. Then the elephant followed. He was pushing along a toy piano. Twit, twoo, twit, twoo, and 4 owls marched slowly by. Next slide. But behind them was mischievous Mickey Mouse on his scooter. Suddenly, he blew his horn, and all 4 owls jumped. "What was that?" they hooted, and they saw that it was only Mickey. They stalked closely behind. Charlie, the wooden doll, winked at Mickey as he went past and said, "That just serves those conceited old owls right. They think there's nobody as clever as they are." "Then they don't know me," answered Mickey. Last to come along was a motor car that seemed to be falling to pieces. Inside said Amos and Andy, the 2 black clowns. They were not looking where they were going, and before they could stop, they ran bang into the pile of toys, scattering them in all directions. Everybody was helping Santa. At one side of the tree were 2 toy cranes. The wooden dolls in charge of the cranes first of all lowered the scoop, which took up the pile of toys and sweets. Then, right away, and chum, chum, would go the engines. Santa Claus came down to watch the cranes working. "That's right," he called cheerfully. "We'll be finished in no time." For a minute or two, the toys were wondering how they could arrange the presents so that the tree was completely covered from top to bottom. Then the toy artillery came up with 2 fine guns, and they quickly piled up the sweets and fruits beside the guns. Then, one after another, they loaded them into the mouths of the guns and shot them right up to the topmost branches of the Christmas tree. Next slide. By now, the Christmas tree was nearly ready, and a toy airplane came. Zooming up from its tail, flowed a trail of tinsel smoke, which it twined about the tree, and in and out of the branches it flew, leaving curls and loops of tinsel behind. Higher and higher it flew, until the very topmost branch was wreathed in tinsel. Suddenly, there was a loud clanging noise from the fire engine. Make way, shouted the firemen, who leaped down from their engine and began to uncoil great lengths of hose pipe. More firemen came up, staggering under the weight of the enormous cases labeled artificial snow. And into these they fastened one end of the hose pipe, and from the nozzle there began to flow a stream of shining silvery flakes. This they directed over the Christmas tree. Santa Claus, in the meantime, was busy at the mantel shelf where the children had hung their stockings. He looked carefully at each one, taking out the pieces of paper on which they had written for the second time the presents they had wanted, and he rummaged in his sack to find something that would fit in each sock or stocking. He soon found a pretty doll for each of the girls and a gun for the boys, but when he came to the large bundle that Junior had made instead of a sock, he smiled mischievously, and picking up a quaintly painted doll, he slipped it inside. In Anne's slide 9. In Anne's stocking, there was a carefully folded piece of paper. He undid this and smiled again, for there in the clearest writing was a list of the 3 presents that Anne particularly wanted, at least Only the Dear Santa at the beginning and Anne's own name at the end were written. The rest she had to draw, since she could not remember how to spell the words. Santa looked carefully at the 3 pictures. Yes, he murmured to himself, that's $1, right? But whatever can this be? Why, of course, it's a perambulator for the doll. And what's this? Oh, a rocking horse. When he had finished doing this, he looked up at the tree and smiled to see that it too was almost completed, and the toys who had been helping were admiring the results of their work. Mickey Mouse sat nearby, saying proudly, "Leave your Christmas decorations to Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse never lets you down." Next slide. Nearby sat the Toy Town Band. They were playing merrily when up came Santa Claus. There was a twinkle in his eye when he saw a toy piano. He lifted the lid, holding up his hand for silence, began to play with one finger. The band took up the tune and played it over again. The noise and the laughter was at its height when Santa looked at the clock. "Stop! I'm sorry, toys, but it's time you were all in your boxes and asleep again." So they began to hurry back to their boxes and to the tree. Then Santa picked up his sack, drew the ends together, and slung it over his shoulder and tiptoed across to the fireplace. He was so occupied with this that he did not even notice that he had already, I'm on the next page, reached the mantel shelf, where his stiff pointed hat knocked over one of the candlesticks. "Now I've done it," thought Santa, and he began to climb up the chimney. But the noise was so loud that it wakened Billy and Jack. "What's that?" cried Jack, who was a little frightened, but Billy guessed at once. "I'll bet it's Santa Claus. Wake up, everybody! Santa's filling our stockings! Come on!" Quickly they scrambled out of bed and ran from the room. The taller ones leaned over the banister and looked down to the front room, while the smaller ones sat down, clutching the banister rails and peeping through. Nobody noticed that Junior had wakened up too. "They've all gone off without me again," he said. "They're mean. They say I'm too small to do all the things they do." So Junior toddled to the bedroom door and stood there gazing with wide open eyes. The children had now lost all fear that there could be anyone there but Santa Claus, and hand in hand they rushed into the front room. Molly, stopping to lift up Jimmy, who had tripped over the bottom step in his eagerness to get there first. As they came in, they could see that the room was empty, and though Billy ran straight to the fireplace, all he could see was a little soot falling softly from the chimney. And then, like the others, he gasped with astonishment and delight. For there, in the middle, stood the most beautiful Christmas tree that they had ever seen, all shone and glittered with tinsel and snow in the light of its own little candles. And in front of every branch hung presents. Last slide. But then Junior, too, had come up to the tree, but to his intense disappointment, there was no present there for him. And with a drooping mouth and a tear in one eye, he wandered sadly over to the fireplace. But gentle Molly saw that Junior was really upset, and she called to him. "Look, darling, there's a box here marked specifically for you. Come along and see what's inside." And he rushed over to unpack the exciting-looking box, and with a large label on it, printed in red ink, "For Junior." But just as he was untying the string, the other children heard the sound of sleigh bells ringing. They rushed to the window, tumbling over each other. in their excitement to see what it could be. "Oh, look," called Tommy. "Look, there's Santa Claus himself, driving his reindeer sleigh." The kids looked up, and there above the snow-covered roofs, Santa's sleigh was being whirled swiftly away into the distance. He must have known that they were looking at him, for he suddenly turned in his seat and called, "A Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. And to all a good night," murmured the children sleepily as they clambered down from the window. One by one, they got into bed, and they were soon, very soon, fast asleep once more. And that's a night before Christmas, but it's quite a few nights before Christmas. Let's put it right over here. So it's on break. And we'll look at the time. I think this might be the last one. 8:44.
We
Oh.
have to
Oh,
excuse
that was
ourselves. Never mind.
Night before Christmas should be the last one. That's perfect. So 8:44. Hold on. Can someone? Who can get the lights? I got it. You got it?
Can I put your here? I don't want to. There you
I
go.
have something to do for you guys.
Oh.
We're going to do something special. We have a box opening with you guys.
Oh,
You get to open new acquisitions.
great.
Do you have an iPhone charger then?
I do, and you can plug into any of the plugs here. There's one right here, actually. So plug right
Oh,
here.
great. Thank you so much.
That'd be perfect. And then we get in camera. So everyone, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me show you some of the little boxes so that you see some of the pretty pictures. So the one we just read was right here. So they often had these cute little small boxes for these as well. And then these are the booklets that I was reading from. And I showed you that other magic lantern. Here's another of the magic lanterns. Is that showing well on the camera?
That looks pretty good, yeah.
Excellent. So this is a toy magic lantern with the original slide lamp inside of it, oil lamp. And some of the old catalogs I also have here. So you would buy these lanterns, believe it or not, these lantern slides and everything, just like you'd go, in the old days we went to Blockbuster Video and you'd get videotapes, or you would get DVDs from Tower Records or something, or Virgin Records. Now you would download off of Netflix. Back then you would get one of these. How's that spacing?
That's good.
So this is an actual magic lantern catalog. So these lanterns were the beginning of PowerPoint. This is PowerPoint before PowerPoint. And PowerPoint did not invent this. In this one catalog alone, which is about 100 years old, look at how many existed. There are 3 columns on each page. So just in this one catalog, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of magic lantern presentations, just like the ones I just read for you. So believe it or not, they had this many back then. PowerPoint did not invent them. There were thousands and thousands and thousands. This catalog is for historical ones, but they had all these different genres for it. In fact, I'm going to show you what I like to call the holy grail of catalogs, because this catalog is a catalog of secret societies, the Holy Grail. So they actually had a catalog of lantern slides of just secret societies. Now, I always like to think to myself, how secret could secret societies be if their whole story came in a catalog? Yeah, I'm sure after they printed these, the secret societies got very angry about that. So magic lanterns were the first storytelling devices, like the stories I told you. They were the first PowerPoint, like the PowerPoint slides that we do today. And they were also used to bring back the dead. That's why they called these things magic lanterns, because people thought they were magical. They'd never seen images projected on the wall. So for them, they thought it was ghosts in the beginning. So people called them magic lanterns because they thought it was magical. And there's a guy you know that believed in this, and I have his book, The Spirit Photography. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a book, The Case for Spirit Photography, and this is an actual first edition copy of that book from 1923. And you got to admit, there are spirits right there. I mean, the whole time you were watching these, weren't you? You were watching ghosts, clearly. So he really believed that these were spirits, not the magic lanterns, but when you took, these pictures and a ghost would come out, which to us would basically be double exposure photography, but they really thought these were ghosts and ghost pictures. And he wrote books on this. He really believed in this. He had about 5 books, and I have all 5 of those books. But those were kind of the 3 ways people would often use magic lanterns. Often they would use them in seances. At any rate, I'm going to close up the show for you guys and magically disappear and let you guys enjoy your night. But I hope you enjoyed the world's first Disney magic lantern show virtually. So I hope you enjoyed all the stuff. Bye, everyone. So I'm going to end the